Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, JustusRStone, with one of my discussion videos on Pandora Hearts. This one is on volume number 7. If you're new to these series of videos, this is a full-on spoiler discussion video. I'm going to spill all the beans, so if you haven't read this volume, you should do it before you watch this video. Also, I have not read beyond this volume, so anything I speculate or wonder at, it's really sincere because I honestly have no idea what happens beyond this volume. So let's get right to it. So volume number 6, we had a little bit of levity in the beginning. It was sort of school hijinks with everybody running around the school and Oz finally getting back together with his sister and everything else. And then we have this whole confrontation with the Baskervilles and Lottie, the one girl with the Baskervilles, basically calling out Jack. And in this book we begin with Jack coming forward and we get a little bit of a backstory with Jack and Glenn. And we find out that they were actually very close friends. In fact, Lottie is actually surprised by the relationship that Jack and Glenn have. She says she sees Glenn smiling, which apparently I guess Glenn didn't do very often. And we find out a backstory about the song. Like, here's the thing. So in the last video, somebody wrote in the comments, they're like, you know, you were talking about all this stuff, but you never really mentioned the fact that Oz heard Elliot and Leo playing the song from the music box or whatever from the Vision of Alice 100 years ago. And I was like, you're totally right. I didn't. So I kind of speculated in the comments a little bit like, oh, I think it's this or this. I don't think I actually saw this one coming. So Oz is kind of like, wait, you guys were playing this song beforehand. What is the song? Well, in the flashback, we find out that that song was written by Glenn and that Jack was the one who created the music box of it. Now, in the present, Elliot looks at Oz and he's like, what? I wrote it. And then later on in the volume, we have Elliot discussing the fact that he's having these dreams where he's surrounded by people who are dead and his sword is covered in blood. And it is now so obvious that Glenn, who the Baskervilles are looking for, is now within Elliot. So Elliot is obviously the reincarnation of Glenn, just as Oz is the reincarnation of Jack. But I still kind of wonder if there's something more to that kind of reincarnation, like whether there's something more to it, because thing is, like, Oz is a Vesalius, right? Like that, like he's part of the same bloodline, so it kind of makes sense why maybe Jack is there, right? But on the flip side, though, Elliot is a Night Ray. Like, he's not the same family as the Baskervilles, or at least if the Baskervilles are even a family. I'm not too sure how the Baskervilles work. We still aren't really sure. Like, this book seems to suggest that they are in charge of this sort of gate to the abyss or what have you, but that they have other sort of things that they're in charge of, that they have other missions that they can't really discuss, but because of the nature of the family, they are basically loyal to a fault to its head, who is Glenn. And that's why when we see Glenn ordering them to go forth and slaughter everybody in Sablier, they initially question, they're like, why are we doing this? But he basically shuts them down and says, nope, are you going to question me? Nope, then you should be doing this. And they go and make it happen. We also get this sort of, well, I mean, it's made almost explicit that Jack killed Glenn, because he says to Lottie at one point, are you suggesting that I killed Glenn to advance my family? When she says, well, you know, your family were basically bit-rate nothings before this, but now afterwards suddenly you're one of the 4 mighty dukedoms. And he's really angry, and even Oz sort of has this flashback of the confrontation between Glenn and Jack, and even Oz is thinking, like, I would have just, like, laid down and died, or I would have run. Like, I don't think I would have had the strength to raise my sword against my friend. Foreshadowing! At least that's what I think. And I think this will be particularly traumatic to Oz because we're seeing that it's really Elliot and this sort of strength of his personality and such that is calling Oz out and saying, you know, stop using everybody else as an excuse. Like, you need to start thinking about yourself. You need to start moving forward. You need to stop feeling like you're just stuck back in this past, sitting on a bench where your daddy doesn't love you. And he basically says, like, just by the fact that you acknowledge that that sucks, you've already made a step forward. You've already moved. And so this sort of changes Oz's perception, and it kind of leads us into the last part of this book where Oz has made the decision that he needs to find out what the hell is going on. He needs to find out about the truth about himself. He needs to find out the truth about Sablier. And so they go to meet this very odd duke who supposedly is sort of the big information miser of the dukedoms. And, well, I mean, this video will go on forever. I try to go through everything. But anyway, he ends up basically trying to trick them into thinking he's this one person, and then essentially what it comes out is that, nope, his real interest is in Break, and we find out a crap ton about Break. We find out how he lost his eye. We find out that he was actually an illegal contractor who managed to keep his sanity and his humanity even when he was dragged into the abyss, and that it appears he escaped perhaps because of what happened in Sablier, which is weird because they say that he was a killer from 50 years ago, but we know the tragedy of Sablier happened 100 years ago. So now Alice, who, that's what the Intention of the Abyss names herself, Alice. Again, this is not a big surprise. I think I said way back when that somehow Alice, these fragments of her personality seem to have given life to these different things, right? Like, it's almost like the same way that she cast aside her memories, it's almost like those memories became their own entities, and that they are now operating these different ways. One became the bee rabbit, one is the Intention of the Abyss. And anyway, the Intention of the Abyss basically says, like, the abyss is timeless. Like, it's almost like, it's almost that you can access the abyss from various points in time, and yet the abyss itself is always stationary. So that's, at least that's how I get the impression that this is how it works, because Break is here 50 years after Sablier, and yet the events of Sablier somehow affect the abyss at the point where he's in it. So I'm not sure how the whole, like, it's funny I'm wearing a Doctor Who shirt because this whole thing is like timey-wimey all of a sudden. But, I mean, whatever, it's cool, and maybe it'll be explained more in future volumes. So we find out that, okay, Break lost his eye to Cheshire Cat. This is how it was. We also find out that it's humans that become chains, that chains are human beings that are dragged into the abyss with their desires and everything else. And then the book ends with Vincent, young Vincent, child Vincent, carrying young Vincent, young Gil, child Gil, into the abyss saying, "Hello, Alice, I opened the door to the abyss just like I was told." This whole thing is just, like, I can't even, every issue of this series has all these big reveals, and there's not a lot to sort of, like, take a break on. And with this, I was really actually surprised that whole thing that Break was like, it was like his second time around. So I'm guessing he escaped from the abyss and then somehow became like a legal contractor. But now that's why we realize that his body is kind of like suffering and why he's coughing up blood and he's so sick. It's because, like, his body is basically under all this stress because it should have fallen apart when he was dragged into the abyss in the first place. And not only that, but he's putting the stress on himself of having now added on to that curse, by taking on another chain. And also, like, the dude is a mass murderer. Over 100 people killed while he was this illegal contractor. And still, I mean, we're not sure even about his backstory. Like, we get the impression that, okay, he was a knight of a family, so I'm guessing like their bodyguard or something, and everybody in the family died except for, it looks to be a little girl. And so Break basically goes out to kill all these people to try and turn back the clock so he can save his master. And it seems like that's an empty promise. I mean, it seems that basically we are finding out that, none of these people are going to have their promises fulfilled, that it's just basically the carrot dangling in front of them to tempt them to take on the chains and to become chains themselves, to add to the dollies that the Intention of the Abyss controls and plays around with. That said, if the abyss is sort of central and you can have sort of all of time and everything swirling around it, if you could choose where you exited the abyss, I guess you could travel through time in a way. Like, I mean, clearly this is what's happened, right? Because we know that Vincent and Gilbert were in Sablier as children, and then they showed up as children when Oz was like a kid. Well, I mean, he still kind of is a kid, but like, okay, before he had his birthday and went poof into the abyss for 10 years. But, so we know that somehow, like, basically 90 years or whatever went by with them not aging. And so I can only guess that that's them exiting out of the abyss. And the Baskervilles is the exact same thing. Like, Lottie looks pretty much the exact same as the Baskervilles that she's facing Oz now 100 years later, as she did as the Baskerville who knew Jack before the whole Sablier thing occurred. So clearly there is this sort of time thing with the abyss. Like, we knew that it was already weird because Oz felt like he wasn't there very long and it turned into 10 years. So either time moves incredibly slower in the abyss, which allows you to sort of travel to the future, but maybe not so much to the past. But again, that doesn't explain how Sablier could be affecting the abyss at this point where Break has fallen into it when he's 50 years later. Unless that's a typo. Like, that's when I was originally reading through it, I'm like, did somebody screw up? Like it would be really awful if they did, because that seems to be a pretty pivotal and important piece of information. But I guess I won't know until I read volume number 8, which is what I'm going to do very soon, because this one, the way it left, I can't leave it. I gotta move on. And I'm sorry these videos are taking me so long to get through and get out. I promise I'm going to work really hard to try and get through these, because I want to see how this whole thing ends. And then I guess there was an anime based on this manga. I don't know how many of the volumes it covers, but I've got it in my queue, my Crunchyroll queue. So I've been putting off watching it because I don't want to spoil any of the manga. So I want to get through this so I can watch the anime as well. So volume number 7, like, I know that there's other stuff that I'm missing, and I know that there's so much in these volumes. I could probably go on for like an hour, and especially if I had someone else to even talk to. But so we'll do that in the comments. If there's stuff that I've missed or stuff you want to talk about in the comments, let's do so. Spoiler warnings in the comments as well, I guess, for anybody who's watching this. I'll put that in the notes and stuff. Thanks very much for watching this video. These are my thoughts and predictions and everything else on Pandora Hearts, having finished volume number 7. You can subscribe to the channel if you're new here, watch my light novel videos, my other manga reviews, and I don't just like to read books and crap, but I like to write them too. You can check those out on the link up above as well. Thank you so much for watching the video. I am looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Until then, bye-bye for now.